Now I want to talk about wage privacy.
Oh yeah, wage privacy. That's very
Yes.
important. We brought this
Yes.
up over a year ago. We
Yes.
brought that up. Pledge is visible on the blockchain.
Yes.
What do you do
Yes.
about it? All right. So what's your take, Philippe?
So, one of the fallibilities of Cardano is, for me, it's the lack of privacy. It's the lack of privacy coming from a person that's, I mean, Rick and I, we put ourselves out there. We really do put ourselves out there. We both run stake pools. We're visible. There are people in the Cardano community. A lot of people have seen us or heard of us. So there's a need for privacy for operators and for delegators as well. I mean, there's no sort of coin mixing that I know of that happens within transactions. Even though we're using an extended UTXO model, you can still kind of trace where things are going, how things are moving. It makes it a little bit more difficult, but it's still doable. I think it would like more like coin mixing and stuff like that. But the first question I wanted to ask you, Rick. So the first question is, do you consider your stake pool that you're running a private or public endeavor, a public or private business?
It's a private endeavor. It's a private endeavor owned by a public person.
Okay. So I like the sound of that. So if it's a private business or private endeavor, you should be afforded the luxury of disclosing the financial information that you'd like to disclose. At this point in time, you can go on ADA pools, you can go on Pool Tool, you can calculate exactly how much each stake pool operator is making down to the penny. And you can also extrapolate, oh, they're going to be using this amount of money for a VPS, or they're using a bare metal server. You can get relatively close to all the incomes for all these stake pool operators that you're using. So as a result, you know how much Rick is making with his stake pool.
Gross.
You know how much I am making with my stake pool. Anyone that puts their face out there and puts it behind a stake pool, you know exactly how much they're making. But if we're considered small businesses and we're considered private entities, even though we're on a public blockchain, we should be able to not obfuscate, but shield some of the data that we don't want to put out. And it's not necessarily that you don't want to put it out. You should just be in the position that if you want to put it out, you can put it out, but you shouldn't have to be forced to put it out. IOG is a private company. We've been around since 2017. I have never seen an income statement from IOG. I have never seen a balance sheet. I have never seen a profit loss statement. I have never seen any financials. And there's absolutely no problem with that. They're a private company.
It's a private company.
They
they voluntarily released that data
yeah,
because they wanted to.
yes,
It's their choice.
Yes, it's their choice. Exactly. And if
They
they go
chose
public,
to release it, therefore they released it.
exactly. And if they go public, if they do an IPO, then they have to release quarterly statements and their financials become more visible. But until then, we cannot sit there and say they spent this much here, they spent this much here, they spent this much here, because they're private. They're private. And operators should be treated in the same kind of way. They're running some sort of private enterprise. They should have some sort of way to kind of shield some of that data. And, I know it's all about transparency in blockchain. So you want to know exactly how much is delegated to pool A or pool B or pool Z. But at some point, we have to try to figure out what's the line between financial privacy and just complete openness, complete transparency. I mean, I'm going to bring up 1% pools here only because I'm not criticizing their business model whatsoever.
It's a good example.
It's a good example.
It's real. It's real.
Exactly. They're a very large stake pool enterprise within Cardano. They have a lot of delegation towards them, between 1 and 2 billion. It's a ton. It represents a large portion. There is no face or name behind 1% pool. And they're not subject to the same scrutiny as Rick, myself, or anyone that's putting their face out there. And there's probably a reason why they're that private. They're going to continue growing. They're going to continue growing their business model. They have advantages as an anonymous stake pool that other people are not afforded the same advantages. And I don't know what that means as far as what data needs to be shielded, but I have a couple ideas. They may sound a little bit radical, but Rick, what are some of your thoughts about just giving that anonymity and that wage privacy for operators?
Yeah, well, I think there's a trade-off to everything. You got to look at the pros and cons. That's what I do. And I knew going into this, when we were doing the Jormungandr network phase testnet a year ago, we knew, oh, okay, this pledge is visible on the blockchain. Therefore, when I go public, when I bring up my pools, people are going to be able to see my pledge. Now you have, like, Suzanne actually does a spreadsheet. She's become very popular in Cardano, lovely lady. And she does a spreadsheet showing in US dollar value the gross that pool operators are making. That's very important. People need to understand that is the gross. That is not their profit. Different pools have different costs associated. Some people go with the absolute bare minimum, cheapest possible VPS you can get. And is that good for the Cardano network? Well, right now you can get away with it, but by the time the transaction load on Goguen kicks in, maybe you can't get away with it. But so there's a trade-off. Look at the pros and cons. What are the pros of a public stake pool with a public face and public data? Well, you have more transparency. You can determine whether you know or trust your operator, or you can determine you don't care, right? You say, well, I don't even care who that operator is. All I want is a delegate, set it, forget it, and I get my stuff. Now, the trade-off, pros and cons, what's the cons of being public? Well, people know how much you got. Now, does that make you a target for organized crime? Sure, it could. There are people who live in countries. Now, I'm lucky I live in the United States, and I live in Virginia, right? So, there's a lot of security there involved with that. But some people live in countries where they don't want to be known because that makes them a target, right? People see that pledge on a blockchain. That's dangerous to their safety.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's a security hazard themselves. So they got to trade off. They got to say, well, do I want to trade my credibility, trust, and public visibility? Do I want to trade that for privacy and security, right? They got to weigh those balances, and they got to weigh the pros and cons and make a decision. That's what each pool operator has to do. Would it be beneficial to both be able to market publicly and not have to expose your earnings and your holdings? That would be great. I don't know what the answer is, Philippe. Do you know the answer? What are your thoughts on that? What are the ideas that you had? You said they're kind of radical. What is that you're thinking? Because you're a smart guy, man. You run a business. You run a business. You know how it works.
First of all, I wanted to respond to one comment before I say my idea. Ada Frog says cold keys, big dogs, big guns, which that's perfect. That's a perfect strategy. But I think that a solution should be, if you want to run a stake pool, you shouldn't feel the need to also go and purchase a sniper rifle with a beam on it. Like,
no.
There has to be some kind of middle ground.
Yeah, but look at it very realistically. When the guys are refilling the ATMs, okay, in our neighborhood, the guys who are getting the money out of the ATMs and refilling the ATMs, they're packing heat. They got freaking firearms strapped to their waist. They're wearing Kevlar for a reason.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money. That's why. Now, when I'm in Japan, all right, they're not, they don't have firearms, but instead of having two guys carrying the cash box, they got two guys carrying the cash box with batons, and they got two guys walking behind them with batons, right? So they got more heat than anybody else standing around. Pool operators got to weigh that out and say, holy cow, I'm sure with those people that have hundreds of million bags, eToro, OG, they got these massive bags, Cardano Foundation. There's more than one person sitting in the room when they change the delegation.
Yeah.
I guarantee it. I don't know, but I can pretty much guarantee there's more than one person sitting in a room with the private keys. Otherwise, anything else would be risky, more riskier. So what's your radical idea, man? What do you think? I agree with the frog guy there.
I think it lies somewhere in the middle. So my idea was kind of inspired because I'm in the house hunting process. I'm looking for a house. I went to an open house maybe 2 months ago, and I saw that all the data on the county portal was obfuscated. So there was no data visible for that particular house. And I've never seen that before. But when I went to the actual house, it's because a police officer lived in that house. So I don't know if you're law enforcement or you work a traditional job, a certain job that requires a higher level of security, you can remove some of that data, that name data, not all the data, but some of that crucial data from your particular listing. I learned that recently. So what if we could implement something similar within Cardano? So it's not necessarily I'm advocating to change the K value or saying that K shouldn't equal 1,000 in the future. But instead of maybe putting how much delegation or how much delegation is actually in a pool, maybe obfuscating that number, like not having it visible. But actual delegators could tell whether a pool is saturated or not based on the ROS for that particular pool. And the only reason I say that also is because before I was more an advocate of set it and forget it model for delegators, but it seems like they're going to have to take a more active role in moving their delegation around, especially as we move from 150 to 500 and then to 1,000. So they're going to have to move from oversaturated pools to undersaturated pools to just right pools. And they're going to have to be monitoring on a more consistent basis than I originally thought. So if that's the case, then they could also, you could put the onus on the actual delegator to monitor their ROS in a way that they don't see the delegation, but they see that ROS and they know that if it's dropping under a certain amount, your pool is probably oversaturated, time to move. It's kind of risky because it requires a lot more active participation, and you're not, let's be real, most people are probably not going to be that active within data lists, but in an ideal utopic model, I think something like that would probably work. It would shield the operator from divulging pertinent information that allows them to understand, oh, this person's making this much money, but at the same time, it protects them and shield it. It protects them, but also gives the delegators the information they need in order to successfully delegate. So, yeah, that's kind of radical, no, but I think it would help.
I think it's perfectly reasonable because, and I'll give you a real example. There was one particular whale. No, people track whales. There's whale tracking, okay? And some people were tracking a whale, and then there was a debate about whose whale that is and who it belongs to, whatever, you know. It doesn't belong to anybody, for the bottom line. It belongs to the whale. The whale's a whale, and they own their shit. All right. But that whale's identity was kind of becoming known, but it wasn't exposed to the public. As far as I know, it wasn't exposed. And I thought, man, they're getting close to the borderline, right? It was getting close to the borderline about that. And stake pool operators are interested in that. So you got to take it from the delegator perspective. The delegators want their privacy, right? Yeah. They want their privacy.
Yeah.
So if you start, tagging them and tracking those whales and putting tags on those whales like we do with some of the whales nowadays, out there in the ocean, you're starting to get on the borderline of either violating their privacy, because once that privacy is exposed, there's no getting it back. Or, you'd have to move the ADA from one wallet to another, from one address to another, and create a new staking address. You would have to work to get that privacy back. So I think it is something that needs to be looked at, something that needs to be addressed. Maybe just show the saturation percentage and the amount remaining, but the addresses are on the blockchain, and people just need to be aware of that when getting into blockchain. If privacy is important to you, make sure that your name and face or your identity does not get associated to that quantity in the first place. Because once it is, it's hard to get back.
Yeah.
Someone can always track it down.
And it extends past the stake pool operators. Even as delegators, you're at risk, especially if you figure out, oh, in the future, we all say we want to live within the ADA ecosystem and purchase things with ADA. Right now, there's no sort of privacy laws. Like you go to a website right now and you buy some ADA merchandise or you buy your favorite, you have to trust that that person's going to handle your information in a correct way. Let's say you're a large whale and you go and buy, I don't know, a t-shirt or something like that says Cardano on there. And the store owner says, oh, wait a minute, this just came from an address that has 10 million plus ADA or 20 million ADA. Who is this? Oh, wait a minute. I'm shipping it to their exact house. I know their first and last name and their address. I'm not saying that people are like everyone is like this, but there are people that will leak that information. And since there's no sort of standard or governmental body that's going to stick up for you, oh, I bought it on, you can't prove it. It's going to be extremely difficult for high net worth individuals, medium net worth individuals, and even some of you as the price goes up to live comfortably and purchase comfortably without knowing who you're purchasing from.
Yeah, Philippe, you just brought up, I just now thought of this. I was trying to explain how blockchain works to a big investor. They got big money in stocks. And as I was describing it, they said, wait a second, you mean other people can figure out what you have and you hold? And I said, yeah.
Yeah.
And he goes, that doesn't sound very secure to me.
Mm.
That's how a non-crypto guy looked at it. Big bags, big money guy. And I was explaining Cardano, and when I said that point, he said, that doesn't sound very secure to me.
Yep.
So
yeah,
maybe I'm not a good salesman.
It's not. It's not.
So it does need to be addressed.
It's not. And people say you have to have a separate spending wallet, but that shouldn't be the case. I mean, I have a certain chunk of money in my bank account. I don't care if I'm making a $2 transaction at the grocery store or a $50 transaction at the gas station. I know that, you know, my credit card might get leaked. I might have to get a new credit card, but I'm not in fear constantly that the amount of money in my bank account will get leaked by that particular institution, because they don't have access to how much I have in my bank account. They can, a scammer or swiper can always swipe my card number, but you know, you can only do so much with that. And then, you know, you get another card, but they're not going to be able to access my bank account information just based on a simple purchase of potato chips from a store. And I think that's necessary for us to implement some sort of coin mixing, or, you know, I don't know.
Something like Monero.
Something like Monero.
If people were really that concerned about privacy, I would think Monero would be at the top of the would be a lot more used. But you're right. You're right. People don't carry around their life savings in their wallet. They don't.
Yeah.
Right. So people do have separate. Put the big bags over here. Put smaller spending bags somewhere else. But if it can be traced back, people are going to trace it back. They're going to try to follow the money and figure it out.
Of course.
You know, I've heard of is it Ouroboros Crypsinus? The Ouroboros Crypsinus white paper, abstract, the research paper on that. So maybe we should look into that. We need to get some people for Ouroboros Crypsinus on here. I think that was from Professor Agaliskiayas and others as well were involved with that. So we're going to have to see what are the privacy features coming out. Who are they targeted for? Primarily the delegators, users, buyer spenders, people who are building on Cardano. And then eventually maybe stake pool operators. You can get them looped in there too so that they're not so exposed. Especially since it seems like pledge wars are starting to kick in.
Yeah, yeah. iJustSource says teller at bank can see your info and sell it. That's a very rare occurrence. Like if there's a lot of protocols at banks, if you're familiar with the system, like tellers have to be extremely vetted before they get a job at the bank. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen or it can't happen, but the probability is extremely low. And if that happens, you know, you're gonna have to get a new account, and they'll be able to shield you to a certain degree. But it's not the same. It's more risky in blockchain, more risky for privacy leaks. And especially some of you, what if ADA moons tomorrow or next month? It goes back to $1. All of a sudden, you may not see 10,000 ADA as a lot of money now, but if it goes to $1, that's $10,000, and people are going to be like, "Oh, you're just carrying that around and this and that," and you may have 10 different wallets, and you may not see you may not think that it's a lot of money because you may have invested at a very low price, but people are going to be monitoring your wallets, small, medium, and heavy. And it's something that needs to be talked about, need to be discussed.
That's one thing in crypto that is just, I've learned to tolerate it. People count your pockets. They're like, how much money is he making? How much money is he making? Yeah. How much is he asking for? Yeah. I'm like, come on, man. Yeah. People live down the street from me. I'm like, yeah, okay, good for you. I like your car. That's beautiful.
They count each other's pockets.
Good for you, man.
For sure, for sure.
But you know, you can do that in the U.S. In some countries, it's very important to have that privacy, and they're not going to try to keep up with the Joneses, right? Because they're working hard just to build what they got. But I think to summarize a lot of the stuff you described is don't let people pull you down to a level. Bring them up to a higher level, and do it secure and give them some privacy options.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. This is still the early days, and we know the risks. We weigh the risks, and people take the risks. Right.
Agreed.
Somebody's got to do it.